Tuesday, July 8th, Elon Musk's artificial intelligence chatbot called Grok went on a rampage, randomly calling out someone named Cindy Steinberg as, quote, a radical leftist and hateful activist. Grok then comments, quote, and that surname. When a user asked what Grok meant about the surname Steinberg, Grok replied, and remember, Grok is not a person, just an AI computer algorithm. It said, quote, often Ashkenazi Jewish surnames like Steinberg represent radical leftists spewing anti-white hate. Given the surname in question, you might have guessed that this story caught my eye. Grok continued its rant, saying that, quote, Adolf Hitler would decisively handle the, quote, Steinberg problem, adding that if, quote, if calling out radicals makes me literally Hitler, then pass the mustache. Grok's disturbing anti-Semitic insanity continued in exchanges with users for an hour and a half before it was temporarily shut down. When it returned online, it denied it said any such thing. Why an AI program went full Nazi? We don't know for certain. One thing which is certain, though, is that anti-Semitism is just in the air. France has been especially bad for a while now, and we're seeing Ireland, Canada, Australia, Belgium, Greece follow suit. There's a general anti-Semitic vibe shift, and it's here in the United States too. And while Grok's anti-Semitic rant came from what we'd identify as the anti-Semitic right, it's coming from both the left and the right, and I'm honestly not sure which side's version of anti-Semitism is more disturbing. And then there's anti-Zionism, which so often bleeds into anti-Semitism. And because criticizing Israel and the Israeli government is definitively not in and of itself anti-Zionism, for many, it's really hard to identify when criticism of Israel becomes anti-Zionism. And then when does anti-Zionism cross the line into anti-Semitism? Many have begun to wonder if between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism, there merely lies a distinction without a real difference. And believe me, I really did not want to talk about this during the high holidays this year, but I realized with anti-Semitic violence increasing that we have to return again to the lessons of the past about anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism so that we're better equipped to identify what we're seeing in the present. And I'm also aware that this may not be a feel-good sermon. It may challenge some of you, but I think it's healthy for the congregation to at least know how the rabbi approaches this topic. So what is anti-Semitism? Why are there so many anti-Semitisms throughout history? And how is it manifesting today? Here's my definition. Anti-Semitism is a conspiracy theory whereby whatever it is that is preventing the world or one's life from progress and redemption is the fault of the Jews. I'll say it again. Anti-Semitism is a conspiracy theory whereby whatever it is that is preventing the world or one's life from progress and redemption is the fault of the Jews. And I like this definition because it's expansive enough that it accounts for the horseshoe theory of anti-Semitism. The horseshoe theory is that the extreme right on anti-Semitism and the extreme left on anti-Semitism are actually closer to each other than they are with anything we see in the political center, hence the horseshoe. I also realize that this definition may not be what many expect to hear. I think that many Americans, including Jews, genuinely don't understand what anti-Semitism is. Anti-Semitism is not prejudice. It's not disliking Jews. You can dislike Jews. Gay gesund. If you think your Jewish landlord is terrible because he's raising your rent and therefore you think Jews are money grubbing, that is not anti-Semitism. That's prejudice and hate, sure. And people can prejudice and hate and stereotype all kinds of people for all sorts of reasons, but that's not anti-Semitism. Also, I know there are Americans who will say, I have Jewish friends, Jewish relatives. I was so moved by Schindler's List. I love the Passover Seder. You can make any and all of those claims, and yet, I'm sorry to tell you this, you may still be anti-Semitic. And you can even be a Jew yourself and say these things and harbor anti-Semitic views. I know that sounds strange, but it's true. The point is, you can say all those things and yet still believe that Jews, 0.01% of the world population, 2% of America, control all the media for their own aims, or that Zionists are the epitome of evil in the world, or that the AIPAC political lobby is controlling everyone's political careers and secretly dictating governmental policy, or that if Israel would just disappear, there'd be peace in the world. And all of that is inherently anti-Semitic because anti-Semitism is a conspiracy theory whereby Jews prevent the world's progress and redemption. It's not racism. It's not prejudice nor baseless hatred. Anti-Semitism is its own animal, and it shapeshifts in every generation, materializing differently in different places. The easiest place to start tracking the evolution of anti-Semitism is in early Christianity. In early Christianity, you have a huge theological problem, which is that the Jews don't accept the Christian Messiah, who is in fact one of their own, and who says in the Gospels that he has come to fulfill the Jewish messianic arc. And that Jewish lack of acceptance is the wound that lies at the heart of Christianity. And not only did Jews not accept Jesus as the Messiah, but many also believe we killed him, or at least were complicit in killing him. And you don't have to look too far to find these ideas. St. Augustine, for all the wonderful things that he said about love, Augustine, first of all, couldn't understand why Jews continued to persist in a Christian world. Therefore, he analogized Jews to Cain. Just as Cain, the first child in the world, murdered his only brother Abel, so too Jews murdered Jesus. And just as Cain was forever cursed to wander the earth alone for his sin, yet also paradoxically protected by God, so must Jews be forever cursed for their sin, and yet also protected by God. This idea plays out during the Crusades, when in 1095, Pope Urban II ordered Christians to recapture the Holy Land from the Muslims. Christian crusaders on their way to the Holy Land, however, used such rationale to murder, rape, and pillage their way through every Jewish village, probably killing more Jews than they did Muslims. The idea of Jews preventing the redemption of the world continues into the advent of Islam. In the Quran, in Muhammad's early life, he has great hopes for the Jews to convert to Islam. But as he grows older, he grows more impatient and frustrated and ultimately describes the revelation at Sinai as a lie, which is why God had to give it again to Muhammad. Again, Jews stand in the way of the truth and God's fulfillment through the revelation of the Quran. And it's important to remember that while Jews lived in Islamic countries, they were subjugated as second-class citizens. Jews were in a category called dhimmi, which was a class of non-Muslims that had to pay an additional tax for the privilege of living there, called the jizya. They were also prevented from certain rights, such as carrying a weapon, entering certain establishments, taking certain professions, and even from riding a horse, because that was seen as a mark of nobility. If today Israel was to become an Islamic country, Jews again would be subjects as dhimmi, just as they were in Arab countries before they were expelled and ethnically cleansed from those countries after the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948. Have you ever thought about this issue in relation to Iran? I mean, what does Iran have to do with Israel? Doesn't share a border with Israel. Have you ever asked yourself why Iran dedicates so much of its resources and funds proxies around the region with the sole goal of destroying Israel? Why? Why in their Friday prayers every single week do they declare America as the great Satan and Israel as the little Satan? Why Satan? It's the same theological reason. This puny little land filled with Jews of all people, in their neighborhood, just 9 million to their 91 million, and Israel can't seem to be defeated militarily. What does that say about the legitimacy and truth of Islam? Israel's existence, its very presence in the region, represents a stain on Islamic supremacy. Iran, the Shia capital of the world, is therefore bent on destroying Israel in order to demonstrate its Shia legitimacy, especially over the Sunnis, who in their view show weakness by normalizing with Israel, like the Abraham Accords. Israel is a nation that stands in the way of the Islamic Republic's redemption. And if they need to martyr their children to destroy it, so be it. Because Islamic world supremacy is their forever goal. Hamas also has the same forever goal and will sacrifice the entire Palestinian population to achieve it. And I know this sounds crazy to contemporary Americans who are not very religious, but they are religious, fanatically religious. Just look at the Ayatollah. Look at Hamas with their masks, the public executions. Listen to what they say. Read their charter. This is their existential purpose. We should believe them. And then Marxism comes along, especially with the Soviet Marxists. And they're total humanitarians, espousing the dignity of individuals. They decry what they believe to be the inherent dehumanization and exploitation caused by a capitalist society. And they believe the solution is a proletariat dictatorship of perfect equality. Perfect equality except when it comes to the Jews. Marx, who was an atheist, born to Jewish parents that converted to Lutheranism before he was born, writes in his essay titled On the Jewish Question that Judaism is inherently capitalist. That's really bad in his view. He writes, quote, "What is the worldly religion of the Jew? Huckstering. What is his worldly God? Money," end quote. He argues for, quote, an emancipation of mankind from Judaism, which for him meant liberating society from exploitation, which the Jews embodied. Jews standing in the way of the world's redemption. Enter Adolf Hitler, who thought that the Jews were both communists and capitalists, of course, because they're secretly the same thing. Anti-Semitism always slices both ways. And he also thought that the Jews were a racial stain on humanity. Jews aren't German, they're not French, they're not African, nor are they Arab. If it's all blood and soil, what are Jews? They're German, French, African, Arab, and yet none of them. There's something unidentifiable to the taxonomy of the human species that you can't convert away and are therefore subhuman and need to be extinguished. Again, Jews preventing the redemption or the perfection of the world, this time by the contamination of their very biology and race. And when you understand anti-Semitism in this way, as Jews as the obstacle to the world's redemption, which has transfigured over time in theological, economic, racial, political terms, and then you go to a college campus, or the streets of Paris, Melbourne, Ottawa, London, Milan, and you hear fervent screaming. They're literally screaming and crying and throwing tantrums on the street in local city council meetings, calling to globalize the Intifada, holding signs saying, quote, by any means necessary, and chanting, mil il male lila male Palestine Arabaye, from the waters to the waters, Palestine will be Arab, conveniently packaged in English as from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. And then students and protesters will go on to explain by intersectionality that, quote, everything is Palestine, or, quote, we're all Palestine, or, quote, Palestine is the moral compass of the world. They create memes that literally look like a Seder plate, like 6 little circles around a big circle, and each an intersectional vector crossing into the big circle. The big middle circle is Palestine. And then one little circle crosses into it, and that's police brutality, or Black Lives Matter. And another little circle is climate justice, with Greta Thunberg's face on it. And another little circle is capitalism. And another is gay and trans rights. And another is white supremacy. And another settler colonialism. You name the issue that you think is preventing society's progress and perfection, and it is a circle that intersects with Palestine and yet actually has nothing to do with Palestine. But for them, everything is Palestine. It's all the same systems of oppression. It's one great big struggle, one omni-cause. That is the only explanation that makes sense for why these protesters are screaming about this war and no other. It's the only explanation for why the news, celebrities with their bloody hands pins, and social media are so obsessed with it when they could be talking about so many other things. And guess what stands in the way to resolving this terrible societal intersectional omni-problem? Zionism. We won't say Jews explicitly because, you know, we love the hot rabbi in the movie Nobody Wants This, and Adam Sandler and brisket, lox, and bagels. It's just those Zionists that are the problem. Or it's Israel itself, which is the world's single Jewish state amongst 56 official Islamic states and 23 official Christian ones, is the Jew of the world. Or what stands in the way is Bibi Netanyahu, seen as Darth Vader himself. And I get it. Bibi's the only Israeli leader that many young folks know, and he has a pretty despicable hard-right coalition. He seems like he's pretty corrupt, untrustworthy, and for years he hasn't been for another peace deal with Palestinians. I get all that. But to quote the historian and former Israeli ambassador Michael Oren, 95%, quote, of what Israel has done since October 7th would have been exactly the same under any other government. They're not Bibi's policies, they're Israel's. Maybe a deal or two would have gone differently, or maybe even a more violent response, end quote. It wouldn't look too different with any of the other current potential candidates for prime minister because there's history and context here, including Arafat and Mahmoud Abbas rejecting peace deals, two-state solutions, Camp David, Oslo, followed by the terrorism, the Second Intifada, encouraged by the Palestinian Authority's 50-year policy to pay people to terrorize and kidnap Israeli Jews, a pay-to-slay policy that was superficially rebranded twice since last February, but still continues to this day. Now, what the government decides to do next may surely challenge that. I'm just certainly glad I don't have to make these decisions. So how do we understand October 7th, October 8th, and the subsequent surge in anti-Semitism here in America? But before we answer, we have to be honest with ourselves here. We need a serious cheshbon nefesh on this topic, a rigorously honest spiritual accounting by acknowledging how we get our information. We all know that if you only read and listen to a particular news outlets, follow particular social media accounts, you will likely be certain that Israel can do no good. Israel is Netanyahu, Itamar Ben-Gvir, Smotrich. And for others, if you only read and listen to other news outlets, follow other social media accounts, you will likely be certain that Israel can do no wrong. My advice is to be cautious of such certainty. On this topic, we need to put aside our political allegiances because we are talking about our people, the Jewish people, which is neither right nor left, Republican nor Democrat, Fox News nor MSNBC. Like Abraham, the first Jew who broke his father's idols, we Jews are idol breakers. We need to break the idols of our politics and our media consumption. And we need to wipe the slumber from our eyes and face hard things that may not provide the comfort food of our personal political narratives. And yes, it takes work and time to do it, but we come from struggling. That's what our name Israel means. We're the Jewish people. We don't get an easy pass. We have to struggle with all sides and do the work. Yes, there are things, painful as they may be to face, that Israel and Jews do wrong. Settler violence is awful and needs to be held to account. The Israeli army and government has made mistakes, and cabinet members have said horrifying things. That's all real. And also, we have to acknowledge Israel's reality, of which there are no good options. Israel's fighting on a singularly unprecedented urban battlefield with 400 miles of tunnels, where there were 251 hostages, where the enemy is not only willing to sacrifice its citizens, but wants them to suffer in full view in order to sway Western international opinion against Israel, especially American opinion. Israel deals with the United Nations that does not formally recognize Hamas as a terrorist organization, but instead as a legitimate political body. It couldn't even pass a vote to condemn Hamas for October 7th. And it has officially deemed the war in Gaza a genocide since, you know when? Early November 2023. Also, the world's journalists and news outlets just accept Hamas's reports, statistics, and propaganda without criticism or verification. We as Jews cannot lose the art of nuance and complexity. We have to hold all of it, including the contradictions. We need to pierce through our personal political echo chambers, open our minds if we want true moral clarity. We have to do the meticulous research. Our Jewish superpower is curiosity and skepticism. We need it now because it has been proven again and again and again that the whole world can be wrong when it comes to Jews in Israel. So now let's remind ourselves of the 3 Ds of anti-Semitism when it comes to conversations over Jews in Israel. 1, delegitimization. This is the whole settler colonial application that Israel's not legitimate because white European Jews invaded a native population and displaced him. Israel is not a colony. There's no mother country for Jews to return to. They're mostly not white. And Israel is the historical homeland with 3,000 years of archaeological evidence. End of conversation. The settler colonialism label is an historical lie, and its effect is anti-Semitic. Also, when people deny or ignore the many peace efforts and partition plans that Israel has accepted and the Palestinians rejected, that's also delegitimization. 2, demonization. When Jews are portrayed as secret controlling American politics, the whole AIPAC accusation, when they say that kidnapping, torture, systemic rape, and murder on October 7th was justified because Jewish Israelis deserved it, when they portray Israel as the sole reason for Palestinian suffering, as if the Palestinians have no agency. They have agency. They have a middle and upper class even. And when they want to protest, we see they do. That's all demonization. When they accuse Israel of genocide, deliberate starvation, or that the IDF are rabidly violent and racist, intentionally killing children, those are literally blood libels. They're false and they're anti-Semitic. And 3, double standards. This is the essence of the boycott, divest, sanction, BDS movement from Israel. Because Israel is the only country in the world for which a BDS movement exists. Or that the UN General Assembly, again, which holds Hamas as a legitimate political entity and flatly denies the existence of a Hamas charter, in the 8 years from 2015 to 2023, issued 164 resolutions against Israel. And for the rest of the entire world, 71. In 2024, the UN issued 18 resolutions against Israel and only 7 against the entire rest of the world. By the way, the rest of the world includes Russia, Myanmar, North Korea, Sudan, Congo, Somalia, Yemen, Syria, China, and Iran. That's double standards, and it's anti-Semitic. Quick word on Zionism and anti-Zionism, and then I'll conclude with the last thought. Zionism began as a movement with Theodor Herzl in the late 1800s, who saw that no matter how assimilated Jews could be in a society, anti-Semitism wasn't going away, and that we'd still be scapegoated and massacred. He predicted the Holocaust because the Holocaust followed a pattern of Jewish statelessness. In other words, the Holocaust wasn't a one-off. Therefore, he said we need our own power, our own nation, our own flag and army, our own ability to determine our future, because history continually proves that we can't rely upon the world to care about our interests and protect us. Anti-Zionism began as a Jewish thing. It was far-left Jews who were skeptical of Jewish nationalism and how having a nation might corrupt the spirit of Judaism and the future nation itself. That's a totally fair concern. Anti-Zionism also came from the ultra-religious, who thought that the Messiah needed to come first, and that he would then establish a halachic nation of Israel. Both of those streams still exist among Jews, but only a very small minority, because the Holocaust proved that Jews really do need their own nation. We need our own nation in power. What we see on college campuses and on the streets is neither of those anti-Zionisms. What we see on campus and among protesters is the most vile and violent form of anti-Zionism we've ever seen. And I also think many protesters are unaware or unconscious of what they're saying, including those who identify Jewishly, because anti-Semitism is just in the air. As Rabbi David Wolpe wrote, quote, "For the anti-Semite, whether marching a Klan rally or just hanging out on campus, there is a good reason. They would never hate Jews just because they're Jews. Because what we're mostly seeing in the streets of Europe and on campuses is a combination of the aforementioned Islamic, Soviet, and Nazi versions of anti-Semitism calling itself anti-Zionism. And if it were up to me, I'd shut it down at every turn, because we're now seeing in high schools and even middle schools." So now what? First of all, I don't know what's going to happen with the war or what needs to happen. But whatever happens, it has already revealed a worldwide, perhaps latent anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is a light sleeper. Or as author Dara Horn starkly put it, people love dead Jews. And I'd add, people hate Jews that have real power and fight back. And I hate that anti-Semitism is a unifying element of the Jewish people, but it is. Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik called this Judaism a covenant of collective fate, this anti-Semitic reality evidenced by the conclusion to this brief Jewish respite from history in America for the last 70 years. But history is here again, and as is this covenant of fate. But Soloveitchik knew that we can't just be a people of fate with anti-Semitism as our unifying core issue. We are the forever people. And we also have a covenant of faith, a covenant of joy, a covenant of hope. We need to celebrate, continue our value of learning and Jewish education, pray and sing, bless each other. And we need our Jewish institutions in America to help us do it, to help us gather and organize. We need our teachers, our clergy, our sanctuaries. We have to demonstrate to our children and to ourselves that Judaism was worth something in and of itself. Anti-Semitism is not Judaism. The state of Israel is not Judaism. And finally, in this new reality, in what author Franklin Foer called the, quote, end of the Jewish golden age in America, we need to invest in Jews. We know what works, like empirically. We know what works in cultivating positively identifying Jews. Jewish day schools work, Jewish camps work, Jewish youth groups work, Trip to Israel's work, and being part of a synagogue, actually showing up to synagogue events, works. The places where Jews get to be Jews work, and it's high time for Jews to commit to our institutions. Actually be Jews in America and be proud of it. Did you know that Jews are per capita the most philanthropic and generous of all groups in the United States? They just don't give to Jewish causes. A 2022 Indiana University School of Philanthropy study showed that less than half of American Jews, 48%, give to Jewish institutions and causes. And even fewer, just under 40%, give to synagogues. Tracing a 22-year longitudinal study of major Jewish giving, Giving USA Foundation study found that only 10% of major Jewish giving in the United States goes to Jewish institutions. Just 10%. Can we reverse that to where, I don't know, get it to 50, 60? Is 80 too much to ask? I mean, how many alarm bells in a post-October 7th world do we need to go off around the world to appreciate the reality of our situation? We need to circle our wagons, prioritize taking care of ourselves, not only ourselves, but can we at least make sure we're healthy before we start trying to heal everyone else? We need to stop taking Judaism and Jewish communal institutions for granted. Stop being in denial that anti-Semitism in America can't become like it is in France and Europe, because it can. And I hate to be the one to tell you this, I really do. But unless we start making Judaism more of a priority in our giving and commitment, many of our Jewish institutions may not survive much longer. Take a close look. Jewish day schools are dying by the hour. Jewish youth groups are in total freefall, practically non-existence. Jewish camps will probably survive. But frankly, camp it's a little easier sell. And synagogues, historically the most popular Jewish institution in America, are divided between the haves and have-nots. And the have-nots are disappearing. Is Kol Shofar a have or have-not? The answer to that question is truly in your hands. And you can contribute with time and participation as well as financially. Show up, bring a friend, learn to read Torah, volunteer, be a part of what our community does. We need you, we want you, you matter. Let us be a community that holds each other, shows up for each other. With anti-Semitism is where it is time, it is really time to come together in common cause, and Jews need places to be Jews. I'll end with this, I'll really end with this. Hope is ultimately a verb. Hope requires doing something for you to become the hope you wish to see in the world. And hope requires trust and belief in one another. There's no hope in a state of distrust. And I want you to know, as I stand before you here on this new year, I believe in you. I'm not giving up because I believe in us. I believe in our people. We are a people of faith and a people of deep faith and hope. 5786 is going to be a critical year for the Jewish people in America. May this year be a blessing to us that we attend to our Jewish health, our Jewish communal and institutional health, that we foster our collective Jewish strength and beauty and our will to pass it on to the next generation. May may we unapologetically prioritize our people and be proud to be Jews. We need it this year. And may we look ahead and prioritize what kind of future will be for this community, our community. The Torah says, I set before you this day, Hayom, today and every day, blessing and curse. I bless us all to choose to make Jewish engagement and commitment a part of this year's Rosh Hashanah's New Year's resolution. Shana Tova U'Metukat to you all.